Indigo Talks live. I know it's been a while, there's been a hiatus. I had a lot of stuff going on, but I'm so happy to be back and with a really special guest I'm excited to have on today. So, without further ado, let's get it started. So, I have today Olivier from Combust Astrology. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm really
Thank
grateful for this
you.
opportunity.
Yes, I'm excited. Like we talked about this, and I'm so happy that we're here and doing this today. And
Mhm,
um, I'm an astrology like enthusiast. Like
mhm,
everyone knows that follows me. I'm very big on astrology,
mhm,
so it's a big chunk of my spiritual awakening. I feel very much so. So it's like instantaneously when we met, we just vibed because of that,
mhm.
and I speak the language, so to speak.
Yeah.
So um yeah, so we connected briefly, and we just been cool ever since. And we both work together at Casa Shanti, so shout out to Casa Shanti and the
Yeah.
Casa Shanti family. So some of you may be watching, but not now, maybe later, but I just want to shout them out,
Mhm,
and give them some love there. So I have some questions, and we are going to do a Q&A for those that are watching. So guys, if you're watching and you have questions
mhm,
for Olivier about astrology,
mhm,
whatever it is you're curious about, by all means drop them in the chat, and we'll go through the questions in a bit.
mhm.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks. So tell us about your humble beginnings. Like, how did you get started with astrology?
Well, honestly, it was someone telling me the cliche Scorpios are toxic, and me having no idea what that meant and like kind of confused. I kind of like looked a little bit into that. That was like 2019. That was the earliest that I really like even looked up my chart. I had come across astrology when I was younger, while in the process of learning about mostly occult stuff or just hermetic stuff or you know, in that whole world of YouTube and reading books and philosophy. But I never really stuck with it because I was really more so data driven back then, a
Mhm.
lot in my teenage years. But now I actually, I got curious. I got a reading from someone and they were able to give me a really accurate description of myself and they had no idea anything about me. And so that furthered my curiosity.
Mhm.
And then I just kept going. I got more and more into astrology subtly. I didn't really just like hop in full force like I could. I actually just took bits at a time and I really kind of digested it over the years. And I think I want to say I officially started during COVID. I joined a group of people on Clubhouse. It was a pretty good community. It had its own faults in it, but I just went from that community to more learning and then reading books and then connecting with people who are really into it, joining Twitter, and I think I read some books from the Brotherhood of Light. Their website is light.org. I don't know if it'll still be around. And I really got into those books. I loved them. They gave me a really good summarization, honestly, of everything that I had learned before. So ironically, it's like I've been studying to learn astrology since I was younger. And yeah, from there on, 2021, I really got into it where I incorporated it in my day to day life. 2022, I started doing even more of that. While in middle part of 2021, I started reading. Um, 2022, I really started reading, and then getting into 2023, it was like when I meet someone, I need to see their chart. And so, reading over several hundred charts, like it really started to show me a pattern. And then also, just being a Virgo moon, I could see patterns really easily as well. And I loved it every time I would meet someone, and I'd get to kind of try and guess first, and then slowly over the middle part of last year, I really, really started reading to a point where it would freak people out. And those were online. And sometimes in person, while I was traveling, I did get to kind of learn a little bit about people in that way. And I just kept going. And then this year, around February, ironically, with a beautiful transit, I got into the idea of doing in-person readings, and yeah, that's where I am now, here in May.
Yeah, and just so you know, I've told you this so many times, but I'm just gonna say it on the air. You are so amazing at what you do,
Thank you.
and and I feel, in my experience, the best astrologers have a natural inclination and attachment intuitively to the
Mhm,
planets and the transits and things of that nature. And I think that is what you embody with your craft.
mhm,
And I get a lot of questions myself, and I've also done crazy research. For me, it started with Walter Mercado. I don't know if you ever heard of him, but
mhm,
in the Latin community, he
mhm,
was um, a well-known astrologer that used to be on the Telemundo channel, and he used to do daily horoscopes.
mhm.
So that's how I was put on with him. And then also just like having an interest in reading the horoscopes in the
Yeah,
newspapers and stuff
yeah,
like that. And I think essentially, and it's funny that you said that, you know, uh, with Scorpio being a you hearing that about your sign,
mhm,
I think that's kind of what drove me too. Like Aquariuses get a bad rap too for
yeah,
being cold
yeah,
or unfeeling and stuff like that. I think that's what kind of drives a lot of people to look further into their sun sign, and then they realize it's so much more than
yeah,
just your sun sign. And yeah, that set me on a whole journey with that. And I find that along with tarot, because you already know I've been reading tarot for like 20 plus years.
mhm,
Astrology has been an equally long journey for me too, and that's the thing, you're always learning
mhm,
astrology. There's so much to learn with it, just like with tarot. There's so many different techniques
mhm,
and versions of the tarot, and in the interpretation. Do you try a traditional approach, a more contemporary? Same thing with astrology. Do you go with a classic approach, a more traditional approach, or do you do the more modern? You know what I mean? And
mhm.
I feel that bridging that gap when it comes to astrology is important, utilizing both the traditional and the modern, you know.
Yeah, I
So,
definitely agree with that. I at first did more and more modern, uh, and then I delved into the traditional. I think not even just out of ego, but because I thought it had to be professional that way. And
mhm,
then now it's like I kind of mix and match both, and I realized that being eclectic is what works best for me. And you know, at the end of the day, the whole point, I think, if you're going to read for people anyway, it's to help them see what they probably can't see in their chart. So,
absolutely.
whichever system helps you do that, and of course, sticking to the base root of things, and then from there branching out would be better than trying to fight between two systems. Like even the housing systems, I like use three depending on what the person needs to see something, and I don't have just one set system because each person is different. Astrology will definitely show you that each person has their own flavor that works best for them.
Mhm.
So if you just look at the views of reading the chart from that one specific flavor, you might be missing something that person might need. So,
You know, I feel like with astrology, people are so, you know, threatened because it's so intricate, it's so detailed. People are like, "Oh, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in." But simplifying it, and I agree, like, just simplifying it is the best way. And I think going with the signs, the planets, the houses. I had read a book a couple of years ago where the astrologer that wrote it, um, I I can't remember the name for the life of me, but once I do, I will put it down in the links, guys. Um, his approach was interesting because he said, like, the planets are like the school, right? Like the college. He made an example of college, and the houses are like the programs,
mm,
that you'll be taking, throughout your education, I guess. So that was an interesting way of putting it. I think that's something that I could identify with. So it's like, okay, it put it in perspective,
Yeah.
because each house is a learning process and a lesson. So I really liked that, you know, uh, metaphor, I guess you could say, that he used with that. And I think it's a really cool thing, to learn astrology and explore it. So what would you say for, like, for newbies or people that are interested in learning astrology? What would you say to them would be the best place to start?
Ooh, the best place to start. If I had to relearn astrology, basically, I would start off with one sign at a time.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't attach too much to the one sign, but I would learn about it because it'd be like having a perspective of just learning about even a sibling of yours, right? If instead of looking at it as you, look at the chart and say, I'm learning a person. And then that way you are not too attached to it because I think a big mistake that I made, and I also see a lot of people making, is once they find one thing, they're like, oh, this is why I always do this. And as you learn more, you'll realize that it's more intricate than that. So by just being a little bit vague, ironically, with the one placement at a time, you could then, over the course of learning more of astrology, be like, okay, so this is a shade of what I can be at times if I have a trigger about this. And with my home life and how I grew up, this shows this way. Because not every single Aries is the same unless they quite literally have the same chart with the same thing. But then you can have two different people of different signs express themselves like an Aries. So it's like it gets really complex. And when you first start off, you kind of want to take your time, learn each individual sign, and just have fun with it. Don't overthink it. Don't criticize other people. And also don't criticize
Right.
yourself for downfalls if you see that you have a detrimental placement or a bad aspect to something. It doesn't have to be the end of the world.
Because it's true, like, every honestly, I feel every sign has its shadow aspects. You
Hmm.
know, it's like, certain signs get a bad rap. Like you mentioned about Scorpio, Geminis get a bad rap.
Hmm.
There's so many people that are like, "Ugh, Gemini." I've
Yeah.
heard that time and time again, and I personally vibe with Gemini. And then I remember when you read my chart, because I believe the second decan of Gemini in my chart.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I was like, that's cool, because a lot of Gemini people that I did meet, I would just have the best conversations, and I would just instantly just start
Yeah.
just rapping with them because there was a common ground there. So see what, and I guess you could agree, right? Everyone has qualities of all the signs, right, in their chart.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone has the whole zodiac in your chart because even if you have one sign, your degree will be typically a different actual sign in a sense. It's like a shade and it's a blend. You don't just go from 0 to 1, you go from 0 to all the decimals to 1. And your example of you getting along with Geminis, that's a really big thing because Geminis do get a bad rap, and they tend to reflect a lot to people. And the thing is, they're really good at mimic, and so they get a lot of bad rap because, well, if you dislike a Gemini a lot, there's a good chance they're just reflecting you. And so
Hmm.
when you say that you can speak to them so easily, it's because, like, if I looked at it astrologically, then I would say you have the Gemini degree in your Aquarius. And so that degree allows you to be very communicable. And then that's how you and the traits of a Gemini get together. And then I'd get into your decants and all the other aspects. But that simple thing is something I even hear it when I go around, like, I hate XYZ, and XYZs are always like this. And it's like, it's ignorance, but it's not the truth entirely. So,
Right. Like, early on, I had a thing with Leos. I did not like Leos. I think it's because the Leos I encountered were always so ostentatious, like over the top. They
mhm,
were, drama and extra, and I just used to be so put off. And then, you know, as I got older and I matured and I learned more about astrology,
Hmm.
I learned that Leo's my opposite sign. That's my direct seventh house, right?
Hmm.
So, just like you said, if you don't like it, there's something that's reflecting,
Hmm.
in yourself about why you don't like them. And I thought about it, since it was seventh house, I think, and I'm pretty sure, my boyfriend would agree. I think in a relationship, I'm a Leo. I behave like a
Yeah.
Leo.
Yeah.
I do, and I've come to terms. Okay, like I did.
Mm.
I legit came to terms with it. I said, okay, you know what? Um, in a relationship, in a union, I'm totally Leo. Like my
Mm.
behavior, my mannerisms is Leo.
Mm.
So I think it was just reflecting, being around other Leos because they're just like that all day, every day.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So,
Mm.
but that comes out of me in a relationship, in my
Right.
connections with others. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
once I made that, you know, like I said, that connection, I connected those dots. I was like, makes sense now. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
um, and then I have my North Node is in Leo, right? I know you're laughing at that one.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so in this lifetime, right? Because North Node is like your potentiality, like your path, like what,
Mm.
right? So I'm supposed to be a Leo.
Right.
And I
Right.
was so off put. I was just like, ugh, Leo. And I'm like, that's my potential. That's where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to go on a Leo's path. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So, like I said, once I started researching and learning more about that, I was like, okay, kind of makes sense now. So I think
Yeah.
it would reflect in a sense where, it's bothering me, I guess, because I'm more of my South Node. I'm more of the Aquarian. I'm always the weirdo. I'm always the eccentric, you
Mm.
more behind the scenes Aquarius, more about everyone else and not about myself. So I
Mm.
think it was something like I had to come to terms with, learning to put myself first for a change, which a Leo essentially knows how to do without
Mm.
question. You know what I mean? So, it was a big lesson. And there's such a strong, I feel, psychological aspect to
Mm.
astrology. And I know you've been reading a lot on that. Um,
Yeah.
so, so where would you say, like, for those that are researching their own chart, what would you say is the highlights they should look at first?
Well, if they're going to look first and they're going to keep it very basic, I would tell them to look at their moon, Mercury, and Mars, because your moon would be how you feel, your emotion, your Mercury is how you think and communicate, and your Mars would be your course of action in a gist, right?
Mhm.
That way, because that would cover a lot without having to get into the other planets to deeper psychology. The moon and how you feel is going to be correlated to the Mercury when you have conversations with people and how they make you feel after the conversation. The two interactions would be pretty important. If you want to have good relationships with people, friends, family, intimate lovers, you need to be able to share how you feel, right? So I would personally say that the moon and the Mercury are paramount because without those two, how do you have a good conversation with someone, right?
Mhm.
Um, while we're speaking, it's just our moon and Mercury really acting here, you know, sharing how we feel about astrology, sharing our intellect and viewpoints of this would be Mercury and moon. Now, the action and how you go about doing it, getting things done in life, uh, that would be the Mars. And that, to me, would be another important thing to learn because then you could see conflict and how you could handle conflict without getting into the outer planets and how they affect you. The moon, Mercury, and Mars, the way they aspect everything else in your chart, I would take a look at that because the sun, rising, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, not so much Saturn, but through Jupiter are like conscious levels. Liz Green talks about that, but it's like it's your consciousness,
I
and
love Liz Green.
yeah, she's
I
so
love her. She
amazing.
great stuff. I love
She's
her.
so good, and her speeches, I would highly encourage you guys to check that out. Her
Definitely,
speeches
guys.
are very good, and going into Saturn, it's like a barrier of fear, and then from Saturn into the subconscious, which would be Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, you kind of get a little bit of a flavor for Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto through those three, in my personal point of view. Like, I would say that Neptune would compare to your moon, Mercury would compare to Uranus, and then Mars would compare to Pluto. So you get to see an upper octave. That's not like official astrological text, but that's how I would make it easier before you dive into those because they're each very, very long themselves.
Mhm.
And knowing those, you could interact with people a lot better. Like someone with a Leo Mars, Gemini Mercury, and a moon in uh, Aries, right? Because your Mercury can only be one away. I would tell you, you're volatile. You're volatile. You're ready to debate. Not even looking at
Yes.
anything else, just that. I'm like volatility is,
Fire,
yeah, fire, fire, and then an air Mercury.
air, just
It's
feeding that fire. You know what
feeding
I'm
the
saying?
fire.
Like
Exactly.
that would
Um,
be a lot.
It
Yes.
would, because, and this is where you get into the stages of psychology, like you were saying, where I look at it in threes. Three triplicity is like really easy to think about, but it's like child, adult, elder. And so the child version of all those, it would be the Leo is so egotistical and prideful. And that's
Mhm.
the stereotypical Leo that people see. The Mercury would just constantly want to talk because of Gemini. And then the Moon and Aries would just never want to back down as well, and it would just want to have stamina through this.
Mhm.
But the adult Leo could look at the scenario and say, what is the best outcome for the both of us? Because the Leo
Mhm.
wants everyone to win truly when it is mature. The Gemini would decide whether or not it's worth its time to continue this conversation if there isn't anything to gain. That may or may not be adults, depending on the person's point of view. But I think that's more mature than the baby
Mhm.
form of Gemini, which would just word salad. And then the moon in Aries that is mature would be able to control their temper enough to get
Mhm.
it through. And then the absolute elder versions of it would be able to sit down and all three of them work together to give knowledge to the situation and diminish ego as much as possible, but have a very firm boundary on things and be okay to be disagreed with and move on with it. And
Right.
so those are like three different stages that you could take, just those three, and it would be a very, very important way to just start. Yeah.
That's an interesting combo, and I do believe actually, uh, Taylor Swift has similar she has
Mm,
Gemini, Sagittarius, and Leo
okay.
strong in
Okay.
her chart. So she would kind of go into this category, right? And yeah, so I believe we spoke about her not so long ago with the whole, Travis Kelsey, and they're just,
Yeah.
been hanging tight with that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but yeah, she got a lot of fire, and she's got, I believe there's some Gemini in there because that is her opposite sign, and I think there's Leo in
Mm.
her north node. Is it her south node or something? But I
I.
know there's Leo in there with her, or
Hmm.
moon.
Hmm. I looked it up. She has South Node in Gemini, North Node in
South node Gemini.
Aquarius.
Right. Okay.
Yes, and then she has a lot of Sagittarius Sun.
Mm-hmm.
She's Mars in Scorpio, and then her moon is at the first degree of Cancer. So it was really close to being Gemini, but that's still a
Mm-hmm.
lot because that's like Cancer, water, and then Mars would be more water, but it's ruled by Mars because it's Scorpio. And then the Mercury would be Capricorn. So that's like, that could be pretty, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't forget to me.
No.
The Mars is in Scorpio. It doesn't necessarily want to be in Scorpio, but it could work there. Moon likes where it's at, and then Mercury is in Capricorn, where it's a little bit hindered. I don't think it really wants to be there either. This is very how do I feel about the situation? At its most immature state, it's like the way I feel is most important because Moon
Mhm.
is like I think the king there, or the queen, you could say, where Mars is like I will do whatever we have to do for the queen, which would be the Moon, how I feel, and then Mercury would be like, okay, whatever we have to do, we're on par with Mars, so it'd be like a spy and like warrior. They're like whatever we got to do for
Mhm.
the Moon. There is the way I would look at that energy playing a part as it gets more mature, this would be a really good like resource for a lot of potential emotional depth while also being able to have difficult conversations, while
Mhm.
also being able to see through what could be fake or true uh, desire of other people to be able to do things and fit into environments very well in a stealthy way. So, yeah.
Mhm. And it is interesting because I think Travis Kelce is an Aries, and you just mentioned Aries and that kind of being those placements kind of
hmm
being kind of troublesome there. And I think he's an Aries. I'm pretty sure I
Let
looked
me
into it a while ago. I
Yeah, let me see his chart. I'll take a quick look because we don't necessarily know if these are the official charts of them, but
Mhm.
I will go ahead. It says, oh, it's not giving me his chart. Oh, never mind, I got it. So you were close. He's a lot of Libra. So it's the
Mm,
opposite. He is an Aries
opposite.
rising though.
Aries
Right,
rising.
right. He's
Okay.
an Aries rising, and he has Mars in Libra, Mercury in Virgo, and Moon in Sag. So I look at this and I'm like, this is a man that
Mhm.
can get himself out of any difficult circumstance really easy there, just based on those three, right? Not looking at
Right?
the rest of the chart. The Moon in Sag is there for a good time. It's lighthearted. It's very joyous and sometimes a little bit too much. And the Mars in Libra is doing whatever it can to just keep the peace. And then the Mercury in Virgo remembers everything and wants to plan and wants to help. And, you know, with their synastry, with just those three alone, I would have to assume here that Travis Kelce is definitely doing whatever he can to make sure that Taylor Swift is accounted for a lot more than his own needs, if I had to assume just based off of those three. But there's more in their chart. I think a really big part of their relationship synastry is Travis has a Venus in Scorpio, she has a Mars in Scorpio.
Mm,
Travis has a moon in Sagittarius, she has a sun in Sagittarius,
mhm.
and those play really well. Travis has
Oh yeah.
a Jupiter in Cancer. She is a Jupiter in Cancer. She also has a Moon in Cancer, and then his Saturn is on her Mercury. There's a lot of nice little interplay between them that also
Mhm.
adds more to it. But just looking at those three, I would say that yeah, Travis is doing the best that he can to make sure she's accounted for.
So with that being said, right?
hmm
Uh with the sun and moon synastry versus the Venus and Mars, what would you say is more like better as far as compatibility? Which works better, the sun moon or the Venus Mars?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
Right? Because I find that it could be both, right? Equally, but then it depends on the sign, right? Because
yeah.
I too I've checked the synastry between myself and my partner, and we have a moon and Venus
hmm
synastry going on, but
hmm
it's opposite though, because
hmm
I'm Capricorn. You already know I'm Capricorn.
hmm
He's Cancer,
hmm
so that can be like the whole seventh house opposites attracting, but we get each other kind of thing.
hmm hmm
Um, but I
Interesting.
an interesting sun moon placement too is it was Jason Momoa and Lisa Bonet, but they I didn't expect them to separate, honestly, because they were so like kindred,
Hmm.
like chart wise. So, but
Hmm.
life happens, right? I mean, not
Hmm.
everything's written in stone, but it was
Hmm.
just interesting to see because he's a sun in Leo. She's a moon, I believe, but she's Scorpio also.
Hmm.
Scorpios get a
Hmm.
bad rap.
Yeah, they do. They really do. I pulled up
She's
their chart.
I think
Uh,
he's a moon. No. I know he's a Leo. And I think, yeah, I know they got a sun moon synastry going on there.
let's go
So
ahead and take a look. I'm pulling it up. But yeah, I do see he is it's funny, I've never looked up Lisa Bonet or Jason Momoa, but when I look at their charts, I just find it hilarious. So yeah, just no, I
I
find
mean
it
it's
hilarious because
yeah, it's true, right? It tells you a whole story, don't it? Like it just
yeah,
yeah, it gives you a real good glimpse.
this
I feel
explains a
you.
lot actually.
Right?
For Jason Momoa, this explains because I know that like I watched Aquaman and I
Mhm.
kind of got a glimpse of it and I remember when it was coming out, there were a lot of people that were like fawning over Jason Momoa, and I was like, okay, he's tall, he's taking care of himself, he has a lot of hair, and it's like a look, and I got that. But now seeing his chart, I'm like, oh, he was tapping into some stuff that most people don't even realize. And I'll say that like he has Moon and Uranus and Scorpio, and whether or not the rising time is known here, um, that is insane. Together in Scorpio, especially as a man, because that's going to
Mhm.
attract the opposite. And then he has Jupiter, Sun, Mercury, and Venus in Leo. And
Mhm.
that is what I think really like
The attraction factor, right?
that.
That is
That is
it's like through the
insane.
freaking roof,
It's through the
right?
roof. That
Yes.
square that they have, it's such a it is, and I think a lot of people would fall into that. But then with hers, right, she has Sun and Neptune, right, in Scorpio. And this is the thing with them, right? He has Moon and Uranus, and it's like absolutely Uranus and Scorpio is like the exaltation where it would be seen as like the most spontaneous, like the most different, the most chaotically different lifestyle, right?
I
And that
got
would
that placement.
appeal. Yeah, yeah. Um,
Yours Uranus is
right,
Scorpio. Yep, I got
right
that.
next to his moon. So
Yeah.
like to be in a relationship with that is to be so connected to something that is always changing, and it's like a sort of excitement. But then the square that he has to the Leo will now make it on a bigger it feels like you're part of theater. And so her having Sun and Neptune the same degree at 24 degrees, that's crazy as well
Mhm.
because they both have this attraction in them. And I want to look up what Lisa Bonet looks like, but that with her son, I would assume people just want to stare at her, and she just,
Yeah.
yeah, this is so
Lisa Bonet
cliche.
always had that je ne sais
The
quoi, like since
Yeah,
back in the day, since the Cosby Show days, like
yeah,
everybody loved her because I liked her character when she was Denise Huxtable. Because she was always
mm,
like the eccentric one, the kind of eclectic. She did her
mm,
own thing. So I think her true persona was kind of reflected in Denise's
mm,
character.
mm,
And I think that was the appeal with her. Like she was just uniquely her. You
mm,
know what I mean? So, and
yeah,
then there was the big controversy with her leaving the show and getting with Lenny Kravitz, having Zoe Kravitz, and all that stuff. But yeah, she's always equally been in having that attraction factor since
mm,
forever, since the '80s. You know what I mean? So I think
mm,
that's like definitely common ground with them. You
mm.
know.
This is honestly insane
You looking
of
right? You
like
looking. I looked
to look
myself.
at.
I was like, "Yo, this is a interesting. Like, yeah, they got
Mhm.
interesting charts. They
And she
do."
really does portray that sun and Neptune because the Neptune with the sun is absolutely dreamy and absolutely looking at someone that's just like, they just look at you, not dead, but it's like they're just piercing into you because it's already Scorpio and then sun and Neptune. So that's like a lot of that energy. Um, to also have Mercury in it is to add a significant quiet silence to the factor of where people perceive you, but they don't know what you're going to say. So you could sit there and have so much energy
Mm,
with that like exerts out, that can make people feel uncomfortable. And you know, she she has an empty Leo. So, I would assume when they were together, she doesn't really talk much. She lets him do all the
mhm,
talking, and she just
mhm,
sits there and gets to benefit a lot. Not that she needed him to be who she is, but like she didn't need to do it. She could reflect the energy that he's exhibiting from himself. And that's an interesting synastry. I would be shocked too about what could happen other than like a transit and also life, because of the fact that like, what happens in life will definitely affect the people. And so
mhm.
that can affect the relationship.
Absolutely. And then, it doesn't make it any easier when you're a celebrity, you're living in the
Hmm.
limelight. When you're working on movies, you're away for long periods of time. That
Hmm.
takes a toll on, and that can strain a
Hmm.
relationship. You know what I mean? So I could see how there would, make be struggles in that sense. But you're
Hmm.
absolutely spot on, because seeing interviews with the two of them, she's always just kind of reserved, and she's kind of the free spirit, and she'll just, go to awards ceremonies with him, and she'll just be on his arm and smile and be polite, but he'll be doing, like you said,
Yeah,
most of the talking. Like,
that's the
she's
Leo.
just there supporting her man. You know what I mean? That would always
Hmm.
be kind of the dynamic between them. So that is totally like accurate based on what
Hmm.
I've seen with them. But
Hmm.
like I said, I was kind of bummed about the two of them, because he was just so smitten with her. Like, he said
Hmm.
he's been in love with her since he was a little boy, like uh and I didn't expect them to separate. I was shocked, but like you said, like we said, life happens. But
Hmm.
uh it's interesting how a lot of Leo can be sort of chaotic. Like,
Yeah.
we were just talking about, speaking of Leo, we were talking about J Lo and Ben Affleck. Remember, we were talking
Right,
about that,
right, right.
because that's
Yeah.
all over right now. That they're like separated, they're having issues.
Hmm.
And I always felt like Leo with Leo is always kind of a recipe for drama and issues, and
Hmm.
yeah, because it's like they're the same kind of energy. I would imagine two Leos would have similar placements close to each other. That would be a lot. You
Yeah, yeah.
know?
It's it's kind of definitely a thing. Um, the way I think I had mentioned that to you, because someone else had also asked me to look it up. Although I don't really typically look up celebrities and know too much about them. While I was looking her chart up and his, I was like, wow, there is definitely a karmic touch to the both of them, um, and how like they are kind of bonded to each other. So the duality of having two Leos here, it is more than just that. It's like they're almost dating each other, and that could be pretty tough because they got the same moon, they got the same sun, they got the same Mercury. There is a
Mm,
lot here that's moving on, but it's also the way their Venus and Mars are interacting with each other, and their subconscious, their generational planets are, which is another big factor where they have a hold on each other in different ways, so that when they try to pull apart, it's so hard to do so, and it almost feels like a prison for them to be in a relationship with each other, but they just can't
mm,
let go.
yeah. So you could see, like, what would you say would, for you, looking at a synastry chart, what would be indicative of like karmic, like a karmic tie there?
Ooh, um, a karmic tie to be in a relationship long term against your will is probably going to just be Saturn, because Pluto will eventually create absolute chaos, and it would take very two mature human beings uh, for it to like really be okay. And then Neptune could just make them stay um, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And then Uranus would probably just intensify just sporadic love. But
Mm,
Saturn would probably be the thing where it's like someone's one person's Saturn over the other person's Venus, or one person's Saturn over the other person's Sun. it's like I'm lending myself to give you authority over me. And then in opposite, if there is another aspect of that person's Saturn to the other person's Mars, maybe they won't be able to make the right actions to step out. It'll just be a whole lot of getting stuck and not wanting to move.
Right. Saturn is always one of the placements where you would see the most karma and challenges uh,
Yeah.
that I've noticed. I mean, studying it in my own chart,
Hmm.
it got me to see like the things that I was challenged with and working on, and then you get your solar returns, right? And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
those are, you know, the moments where you're challenged the most, or you're introduced to new chapters, right?
Hmm.
I actually had a client friend that he's on his second Saturn return. I believe it's in your 50s.
Hmm.
So how do you feel that differs, like, as far as where a person is? I mean, the first one is in your 20s, right? And then you get the second Saturn return in the 50s. It's just like
Hmm.
a whole different vibe, right? It's just like now they're at a juncture where they're more mature and have an understanding, right, of their strengths and weaknesses. But how do you feel like that can play out? Um,
Hmm. Well, I mean, we could use Lisa Bonet as an example because she's
mhm,
about to have her second Saturn return uh,
mhm,
in 2 years. And she has it opposing her Venus, right? So with that, whenever Saturn would go through that, I would expect a lot of attempt to liberate herself from where she's at. So if
mhm,
she's in a relationship, right, that would be something that I'd be like, okay, we're gonna see how psychologically in depth she is on herself, or it might cause a breakup. That's very simple, right? Not looking at everything else that the Saturn is aspecting. And that's how the first Saturn should be like a, hey, you're no longer a child. I want you to mature and I want you to do things that make sense. And the second Saturn should be like a checkup, right? It should just be, okay, did we continue on the path after that reset? And if we didn't, we have to fix that now. If we did, then we're gonna keep it going. Maybe smudge out some things. In my personal opinion, the first Saturn should be the scariest. I don't think the
oh yeah.
Saturns after should be.
You ain't
Um,
lying about that. I don't even want to remember my first one. Woo, that was
yeah, yeah. The
chaos.
The
That's putting
first
it
one is
lightly.
definitely chaotic, yeah, because it actually sets you up in a very interesting way that people, I'm sure other astrologers know, but most people might not. So before your Saturn, you have something called a nodal reversal, where your north and south node are going to be inversed to your actual natal north node and south node.
Mhm,
Where if you have north node in Aries, your south node is going to be in Libra. The south node is going to be Libra while transiting, so it's going to like touch. It's going to be like an eclipse because the north node would be like the sun and the south node would be like the moon, so it'd be an eclipse and, in that sense. And you see your blind spots for the first time ever, right? That is scary when you've just been minding your business, right?
mhm,
And then going even before that, depending on, you know, your chart, you might have the Saturn before touch your
mhm,
planets, right?
mhm,
Touch some of your chart. Um, and that could be difficult. Like, I'm going to use Lisa again as an example. Right now, Saturn's in Pisces, right? She's having Saturn opposing her Jupiter and her Pluto and her
mhm,
Uranus before the end of this transit, right? She
mhm,
already had it do her Pluto. So it's like a breakdown of all this
mhm.
before. So it's like the Saturn really, it's going to be chaotic, but you can kind of curb it if you start seeing the patterns 4 years ahead, ironically. But if you don't see the specific warnings before, it's going to blow you out of the water and you're going to be absolutely like worried. But it's not bad. It's just the fear and discipline is supposed to strip you to say, do you really mean what you say you mean? Because I'm going to make you work hard for it.
Right.
And so
That
with
makes
Saturn
sense.
touches, yeah,
That
yeah.
makes sense because even intuitively, and it's not like I'm crazy into celebrities or anything like that. It's more so research and ways to
Mhm,
look into um their personality and where they are, you know what I mean? So
mhm,
it's always something for me that I like to do just
mhm,
for
mhm,
research reasons. You
mhm,
as well. So
mhm,
because I don't just look up celebrities. I look up people throughout history,
mhm.
because I'm a big old history buff. I told you that too.
Yeah.
um Even there was a phase where I was looking into, because I'm also into true crime, but I grew up around it. My mom was my mom's a double Virgo. She's
Mhm,
always loved true crime stuff since
mhm,
I was, as long as I can remember, since I was little. My mom would
mhm,
always watch Unsolved Mysteries and all the
mhm,
crime shows, and so I kind of grew up with that too, and about solving cases and what makes a serial killer tick to make them do the things that they do.
mhm,
And we talked about this too, that a lot of serial killers also had a lot of mutable signs in their
mhm,
chart, like
mhm,
Gemini, Virgo, or Sagittarius, right? So we
mhm,
talked about that. So that was kind of a pattern. Also, uh, I noticed air moons was
mhm,
was something that was very prevalent, especially moon in Aquarius, especially with
mhm,
Charles Manson. His
mhm,
gift of influence came
mhm,
from the moon in Aquarius, apparently, like they could.
mhm.
So ice to a Eskimo kind of thing, you
Yeah,
know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So it
yeah.
could be a troublesome, it could take you to a dark place, like if you're like, I don't know. I think because of knowing that in my own research, when I come across moon and Aquarius people, I'm sort of wary of like, oh boy, what am I getting into here?
Uh-huh.
Like, it's just something for me to like, okay, they have this placement, which, can get a little cray cray if you take it there. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm, mhm,
but I don't, I try not to judge on these kind of things. It's just
mhm,
like it's something for me to like, okay, they have that. So,
mhm.
if they so choose, right? And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
essentially right at the end of the day, it's free will, right? If
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
gonna indulge in our more shadow baser, instincts versus, you know, not doing that.
Yeah.
But uh but it's just interesting, like how I like to just look at charts now. Like you said, when you want to get to know people or you just want to see how people tick, you look at the chart. I do the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I was like, okay, what's your birth date? I want to look and I want to be, I want to investigate, if you will. And some people would say it's not intrusive, it's just us researching, you know what I mean? Like
Mhm, mhm.
and when you get into astrology, you just find that's what you do. It's like instinctive. Like I want to
Mhm.
look at the chart, I want to see what I'm working with, I want to see what's
Yeah.
going on there, like even with a friend of mine, her and I would like look into certain transits, if it's a good time to do things, if it's, is this a good money day? Is this a good love day? You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
stuff like that, and you definitely do that as well because you've been spreading the gospel, letting us know about the transits, how things are going to look, what to expect, and and I definitely like to do that as well because I always feel like it's important for people to be prepared. And
Mhm.
I think that's something that astrology brings to the table. It gives us a sense of awareness of what to expect with the energies, with the way of the world, and how things are evolving or de-evolving. You know what I'm saying? So it's all it's always good. It's always good to be in the know. You know what I mean? So, and that's something I
Yeah.
feel astrology does. It's so important. It really is.
Yeah, I enjoy the forecast. I think more
Hmm.
now so than even before. Because, since I trade, I get to see the financial markets and I get to see how the financial system is based off of actions that happen, but then now I can see the psychology of people making the actions, right? Uh,
Hmm.
when I see how someone could grow up in their environment and then I see their chart, that's like an advantage for me to be like, this is how this person thinks. This is probably what they're going to side with. I'm not going to make decisions based off that, but doing that, and also like you're saying about history, I just having three historian friends, one of them that is constantly sending me someone. I don't know anything about them, and then I read it, and they're like, yes, 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 yeah, or like, no, this, and that's like cool practice. But also, you can see very much how certain aspects and certain placements in the right place at the right time is so true. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I grapple with the whole free will argument at times because of that. But I will say, like, the person that had it's like a socket. The person that had the best socket plug is the one that was able to go at that time, right? It's like the transit was like a big wheel of fortune. The person that fit the best got the prize, and that's the thing about the forecasting that I like, because it's not like I'm going to go to every person and be like, this has to happen, but it's more like, hey, there is a potential thunderstorm coming. And a few people might have umbrellas in their car. A few people might not. Some people might be colorblind. Some people might not even be able to see. And they don't
Right.
know when the water's coming. But the person that knows, has food, has some water, boiled, whatever, they're cool. Even if they were going to be the heart of the storm to be rained on, they can survive because they know. And that's how I like to look at the potential to do that versus being like, this has to happen to you, this has to happen. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just such a beautiful tool for that. And like you said, when you were younger and you were watching that gentleman on the news, I think that's a fantastic idea. Um, because Moon is in Aries, a lot of Aries placements. Might want to watch your tongue, because especially
Mm-hmm.
how it's going to make you feel during those few days. If you're a woman and you're having these transits while you could be on your menstrual cycle as well, like that could be something else that you like have to think about that could be difficult for you, or it could give people perspective as well to understand that, so that they can see more of what it is. If you're going through a specific health scare and you're having a very harsh aspect to your moon or to your Venus, someone knowing that, outside of just being a good person anyway, could be even more empathetic to know you're also emotionally dealing with this as well. You're not just physically dealing with it. And that emotional, mental, Mercury and Moon, that helps you beat diseases. Like if you have cancer, a good part of actually beating it, besides the medication, is the mindset. So if a transit is hitting you, you feel bad, and your mindset's already stuck in a terrible place. Having the right family around you is going to help you tremendously when you don't even have faith yourself because of that transit. And that's how I would put it together into a nice
Mm-hmm.
package, besides this and this doom. you know
Yeah. And health is such an important aspect
yeah.
too. Like I could see a lot with the person's chart with health wise too. Like we talked about Leo, right?
Hmm.
So if Leo's in a in a detriment or in a hard aspect, right? That would assume there would be heart issues or
Hmm.
coronary issues you might, be on the lookout for,
Hmm.
and want to take care of your heart health and your
Hmm.
cholesterol and things like that. And,
Hmm.
same for Aries. Aries is the head, there's, usually cerebral issues and things like that with the
Hmm.
head. So I'm an Aries rising,
Hmm.
and I've had major head trauma throughout my life.
Yeah.
So when I learned that, I was like, that makes sense, because
Hmm.
I had a concussion when I was like 5, a really bad one, and then
Hmm.
I suffered a head injury again when I was 11. I went back and looked at both of those days,
Hmm.
very similar transits those days
Mm.
that I
Yeah.
ended up with that head injury. A lot of them was hitting on my first house, the head Aries,
Hmm.
um, and I was like, holy crap, they had similar transits. That those are the days that I had those really bad head injuries. So it made perfect sense. And these are things that you can really pinpoint.
Yeah.
That is so important, And interesting enough, that documentary I told you about, the astrology one, they talked about JFK.
Hmm.
The day of his assassination, it was on his Pluto.
Wow.
Yep, it was on
Wow.
his. The Pluto was on his sun at a crazy degree that day. I believe it was 11/22/63, and when they looked at it, it was right on his Pluto.
Wow.
So yeah,
I'm gonna look at it right now.
yeah. So I was like, whoa, that made
That
a lot of
is,
sense.
that would be very, oh, okay. I see what you mean.
Hmm. When they pointed that out, I was like, whoa. And Pluto is the planet of death and rebirth, and um, I believe it was on a critical degree as well.
Mm.
So that day, so it's interesting.
This is this is interesting because it's there are a few. Uranus was Moon and Uranus were both giving him a pretty hard time. I think that the whole chart in its essence as well was a big factor of the problem here. Um, and it all works together as well. But yeah, that's actually insane. Pluto was on his moon, Uranus was on his moon, and then Saturn was also on his. There was a lot here that happened together, and that's like
Mhm.
a an example of like where he could have been at home, no problem,
Mhm.
and then stepping outside the day of that happening uh, adds to that because it would have been a good day to take a rain check, if he had an astrologer. And these are the things where it's like I don't try to base every action I want to do off astrology, but the more you do astrology, the more you kind of want to, because you weigh the probability of things in your favor
Yeah.
outside of like malicious intent of someone else. Like if someone hates you, they're gonna hate you every single day, but maybe one day or another they might be more successful to do something and get away with it. Could be a good case for that. Um, and this is like there's another astrologer and I forget her name, but I've tagged her before in my video because I spoke about this when I did my new moon and full moon video. When we are alive, our body, we are like a soil in a garden, and we consciously are the gardener, and then we subconsciously plant the seed. And so the weather is the transit, and you can plant any type of seed you want in your garden, which would be yourself, with the ideas that you have, things that you watch, things that you consume to plant them subconsciously. And then as things happen, some of your seeds are going to get affected by the storm or not, but like the more you can prepare and see the storm coming sooner, you might be able to cover the crops. You might be able to make a better irrigation. You might be able to have better fertilizer if it's going to be something that's useful. If there's going to be a drought, you might prepare the water. And I feel like a lot of that comes with how you treat yourself mentally and physically. That would be how you affect the soil. And just being able to know, you know, hey, I might have Pluto, you know, opposing my son or stuff like that is really going to play a big factor into it, you know?
Oh yeah. I agree. I really do. That was really profound, and it's so true because at the end of the day, you know, having this knowledge can be beneficial,
Hmm.
and I like I said, it's always good to be prepared, especially with retrogrades, right? Like
Yeah.
I always prepare for those times of year because there's going to be challenges or things to pay extra closer attention to, right? Because
Hmm.
the energies kind of stall, and it gives that it's the time of I like to call
Hmm.
reassessing, reevaluating, especially
Hmm.
Mercury
Hmm.
retrograde, which happens the most often, right?
Yeah.
So I think essentially that's absolutely right. It's
Hmm.
good to be prepared.
Hmm.
It's good to have this knowledge and utilize it for your benefit.
Hmm.
And that's what astrology brings to the table, and it's such an awesome tool once you really start looking into it. But yeah, we could go on and on and on here. Like we really
Yeah.
could. Like we've gone in over an hour already, but
Hmm.
yeah. So I just wanted to see, guys, for anyone that's tuning in, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat. Or even if you're watching later, you could put them in the comments, and we'll be happy to answer questions. My guest is amazing, as you can see. He'll be more than happy to answer questions and things of that nature. So, uh, for those that are interested in finding you, where can
Mhm.
they find you for reading or information?
You could just look me up on all the platforms. Combust Astrology is the name. I could also like link or leave a message, and people could find me like that too. But yeah, pretty much on all the platforms.
Yeah, and this is not gonna be the first live we do. We're gonna
Yeah,
do this again without question because I have so many other things that I want to say here, but I don't. I mean, like I said, we can go on and on. Like,
no,
but thank you so much for coming on. You're awesome,
of
and
course.
I just love talking astrology, and I feel like everything we touched on today was really, beneficial to those that are watching and those that are new to astrology. So,
Hmm.
from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming on
Of
today.
course.
And like I said, guys, we're going to be doing this again in the future. So, just stay tuned. And again, thank you, Olivier. Combust Astrology, guys. Look him up. I will have links down
Mhm.
below with all his information and all the things we talked about today. There will be links in the info there. So, yeah, until next time, this is Indigo Talks, and until next time,
Thank you.
peace.
Bye.